Barclays Bank and its chief executive are being investigated by regulators over their handling of a whistleblower's identity. Barclays says Jess Daly's pay will be cut after he attempted to identify an anonymous source who had raised concerns about another staff member. In a memo to bank employees, Mr. Daly said he got too personally involved as he tried to uncover the whistleblower. Someone who knows the difficulties faced by whistleblowers is Nicholas Wilson, who's campaigned for years about alleged wrongdoing at HSBC. He claims that hundreds of thousands of customers lost out because of unreasonable debt collection charges imposed by two of the bank's subsidiaries. I asked him how his life has changed since he spoke out.
It's hell, especially I think if you're whistleblowing against banks. And I've been insulted, patronised, mostly by the media, I have to say, shut down, censored, but ultimately tried to be portrayed as somebody who's not, slightly nutcase or conspiracy theorist. It's destroyed my life. I haven't worked properly since I blew the whistle.
When you blew the whistle on activity at HSBC, you went to the Financial Services Authority, which is the predecessor to the Financial Conduct Authority, which is now investigating Barclays today. Do you think attitudes towards whistleblowers have changed among the regulators?
No. I mean, there's a lot of window dressing. I mean, it's the same with banks. They've made the banks appoint a whistleblower champion. But we've heard today... Douglas Flint said 2 years ago...
The HSBC chairman.
Yeah, the HSBC chairman, Douglas Flint, said at the Chartered Institute of Securities and Investments, he said that whistleblowers should be celebrated and rewarded. I'm still waiting.
What would be your advice then to someone who works for a large bank or a financial services organisation who's thinking of blowing the whistle?
Well, it's career suicide. My advice is don't do it now, because of the hell I've been through. If you're in the health service or a building site or something and life depends on it, and of course you should. But I think in finance, they will win at the end of the day. Although, actually, having said that, after 14 years, I'm beginning to see some progress. But I wouldn't say it's been worth it. And if people say, would you do it again? Knowing what I now know, I wouldn't, no.
Well, we contacted HSBC, but they've not commented in a recent statement on the subject. The bank said this is a historical issue dating back to the period between 2003 and 2009. We have revisited the debt collection charge, and as a result, a small number of HFC and John Lewis Financial Services Limited customers may be due a refund. Well, Philip Auger is a banking expert who is currently writing a book about Barclays. So, Philip, yet again, Barclays finds itself enmeshed in a regulatory investigation.
This is very embarrassing for banking and very embarrassing for Barclays in particular. It's embarrassing for banking because the industry has an atrocious record at misleading customers, gaming the rules, and actually being very hard on people who do try to blow the whistle. But for Barclays in particular, it's worse in a sense because it's a bank with a troubled history in recent years, but which in the last year or two has just been showing signs that it is turning the corner. And I think it's the timing of it as much as the fundamental issue that will be really annoying for them.
That is the irony, isn't it? As you say, Jess Daly, even before he set foot in the bank, had a memo circulated to Barclays colleagues where he said he wanted to put ethical conduct at the heart of what he did with the bank. He was seen as making quite good progress, wasn't he?
Certainly the business has started to turn around very nicely. The previous chief executive, Anthony Jenkins, sort of cut it right back and got it into a tidy kind of shape. Staley has begun to grow it again. The industry conditions have turned much kinder for him. But that has to be matched with an absolutely pristine, clean, ethical image, and this is an embarrassing episode.
And it makes you ask, Philip, is there something in the water at Barclays? Because we have Bob Diamond, who went after the LIBOR rigging affair. He and his predecessor, John Varley, both being investigated by the Serious Fraud Office over this fundraising they did in 2008. Is there just something really culturally amiss at Barclays?
It does make you wonder, doesn't it, Ian, whether there is something about Barclays. You mentioned that I'm writing a book about them going right back into the 1980s, and most of the chairman and chief executives that I've met going back to that period, have something to regret about the way that they left. There is something about the bank. That's why it's a pity, in a sense, that this has happened, because Staley was making the right kind of moves, the right kind of music.
Now, I'm told that the Barclays board met for 4 hours yesterday to discuss his fate. Do you think it was in the balance? Do you think it was possible that he might have lost his job over this?
Well, I think much depends actually now on the outcome of the PRA and the FCA inquiries. We have a clue as to the way that the authorities might be thinking. In a speech made recently by the Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, one of his senior people, Charlotte Hogg, had to resign over a conflict, or chose to resign over a conflict of interest. A few days after that, the Governor made an interesting speech. He said, "We don't operate a regime where it's one strike and out." He said that an honest mistake, openly admitted and dealt with appropriately by the institution, is not a firing offence. So provided that the PRA's investigation reveals that this was a case of an honest mistake, then Jed Staley should be OK. But we have to wait and see how it pans out.
And, of course, that was very much the language that was used in the Barclays statement, an honest mistake. But they're having their own investigation into how they deal with whistleblowers. Is there a problem with how we deal with whistleblowers in this country generally? I mean, the number of people taking complaints to the FCA fell by a fifth last year.
Whistleblowing is absolutely essential in any industry. It's particularly important in banking, where there is this poor track record in terms of taking complaints seriously. We have to learn from the mistakes of the past, don't we? We have to learn from episodes like this and actually just ensure that in future we leave things to compliance, leave things to the people whose job it is to investigate these things, take them seriously and deal with them proportionately.
In a word, Philip, should we be paying whistleblowers to come forward as they do in America?
I think that will give the wrong message. There ought to be something about British culture that enables us to do this in a balanced, fair, proportionate way.